Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady in the Brady Dental Care Studio, and today I'm joined by Courtney Crowder, columnist at the Des Moines Register, and Kelsey Kremer, photo editor at the Des Moines Register. Do you know each other, by the way? Thanks for coming in the studio.
Yeah, we know each other pretty dang well at this point.
Yeah, that's super funny. So obviously we're going to talk about this RAGBRAI documentary coming out, Shift. But before we do that, everybody listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, the show is everywhere. You can even go to iowapodcast.com and listen on the page. And of course, give it 5 stars. That does algorithm things that I don't understand. But long story short, other Iowans who may like this show are going to find it easier if you give it 5 stars. Courtney, Kelsey, thanks for coming in the show. Let's start broadly. This is like a milestone kind of issue, right? Because you didn't just decide to do a RAGBRAI documentary one day. There's a big milestone. What is that?
Well, it's the 50th anniversary of RAGBRAI. This year will be the 50th ride of RAGBRAI. So we made a documentary to celebrate that.
And that's Kelsey right there. Because
yes.
that way people understand who's talking. Okay, so 50 years of RAGBRAI. Does this include the COVID year, or are we not including that? How does that work?
So they chose to not include that.
Yeah,
so
got it.
That is the RAGBRAI planning team's choice. But yeah, so 2020 is kind of like just a wash, like it didn't exist. And so last year was 49.
I think a lot of people would wish 2020 didn't.
Right. Like, I don't blame them.
Yeah. That's super funny. Okay, so we skipped that year. So we would have gotten there earlier had this COVID thing never have happened then.
Yeah, it would have been last summer.
Interesting. Crazy. Okay, so why did this whole thing start? This particular project? We want to go into RAGBRAI too. We're going to hit both because you have knowledge in both areas. But why the documentary? Why this project?
So I was looking for a project like this. I make photos and videos for the Register every day, and I was looking for an opportunity to tell a bigger story, to make a longer video, to make a documentary. And, the Register, looking at just everything we cover, important topics to us. RAGBRAI is obviously a really big deal. It is our ride. And so I, was thinking about what is a good story idea, and the 50th anniversary of RAGBRAI made a lot of sense. And so I reached out to Courtney and said, hey, I have this idea. I want to tell a really good story about RAGBRAI. I want to make a documentary, and I would like your help. And we went from there.
And I think when we think of documentary as a medium, you need visuals and story, right? Which feels like really simple for me to say out loud, but you need to have the images that are going to carry people's attention and the story. So for us, it was like, you can pick any topic in the world to attempt to make a documentary on, but if you don't have the strength in both of those places, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, documentaries are hard, right? You guys were talking when you came in here about, like, this is not a Ken Burns kind of thing. And what do you mean by that? Like, are people going to sit and hear a soft narrator talking about how wheels turn? Are they going to hear that? Or what should they expect? Because we're going to talk about Shift here. That's what we should probably talk about now. But what are they going to see? What's the overall thing?
No violin. I'll put that out there.
No violin.
No violin.
But yes, piano.
No, Tom Hanks doing voiceover, and no, old photos, right? So it's not a Ken Burns joint, is what I'll say. It's not a Ken Burns joint. But in general, one, you should expect really vibrant and beautiful camera work because we had so many people out on the ride that I'll let Kelsey talk about. But you should also expect a story that is about the people and places that populate the ride. We followed 3 riders and 2 members of a town committee, and it's about their story of personal growth throughout this week that we call RAGBRAI.
You're saying this is for the documentary. You followed 3 riders. Okay, got it.
For the documentary, 3 riders and 2 members of one town committee. And we really thought through what is the heart of RAGBRAI? What is the point of RAGBRAI? So I think a lot of times RAGBRAI gets sort of pegged into this bacchanalia sort of thing. And like, listen, there's a lot of beer, there's a lot of partying, it's a lot of fun. But the reality is that RAGBRAI is a physical manifestation of people's growth, overcoming, celebration. You just don't come to Iowa for 7 days to ride in the July heat if you don't have a reason for it. And on RAGBRAI, you can find yourself in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's like, it's very philosophical almost. Maybe it should be a Ken Burns thing. You should have, philosophers up on stage talking about the psychology of spinning bike wheels or something. It kind of sounds pretty deep. I don't know. Maybe that's chapter 2.
Yeah, that's
Shift 2 is the Ken Burns experience.
Yeah. I mean, it is deep, right? Like, if you haven't been, RAGBRAI is a 7-day bike ride across Iowa, starting in the west, going to the east, from river to river. And you stop in towns along the way, and those towns put on a party for those who come. This is a worldwide event. A lot of people are Iowans who have heard of it, but people come from all over the world to be a part of this. And you have a lot of time on the road to think, to think and to reflect. And that's what people are doing, you know? That's the story. And when we thought about a documentary, I mean, that's the way in, right?
I want to talk about like the places and the people, want to get into all that. But can we talk about some nerdy stuff first?
Sure.
Like, you're the photo person, right? You're the visual assets person. How much footage did you have to go through? And like, when did this start? Did this start a year ago? Did this start 2 years ago? Tell me about that process and how much footage you had to go through, because that sounds like a lot of work. I want to just, anyway.
Yeah, so, I mean, that first conversation between Courtney and I was during the pandemic. It would have been 2020, right?
At some point,
it was, we had to meet at a park because, we couldn't meet in Starbucks to talk about it. But from there, we filmed the majority of this documentary on RAGBRAI last year, so on RAGBRAI 49. And a little bit before that, Courtney and I spent time with our main subjects before the ride. Interviewing those people and sort of filming some other sort of, character building type stuff. But in the end, we ultimately had 70 hours of footage. And I spent August through December just watching all of it and cataloging all of it and organizing all of it. And then sort of at the beginning of this year is really when Courtney and I worked together really hard on the edit to sort of put the story together.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a nightmare.
It does.
I mean,
You're still standing. That's incredible.
My day-to-day job, right, is doing photo assignments and things like that. And I learned that I do not want a desk job, because just sitting at my desk all day just watching video. I mean, it's beautiful video and it's really great. But that was the hardest part, was just watching everything.
Okay, so did they give you like a pretty decent computer for this to actually crunch through all this video? Because that sounds like a nightmare.
It's good enough. It's good enough.
Gosh darn it, Carol, why? Okay, so what surprised you when you were recording all this video? Because obviously, Register's annual, great. What is it? I always forget it every time. I've lived in Iowa my whole life.
This is a fun fact I do at the beginning of every
talk.
wrong
every time.
I have to say.
I just call it the Register's annual bike ride across the state or something. And totally butcher it. But what's the official acronym?
The Register's annual Great Bicycle Ride Across Iowa.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's really fun. If you ever hear me speak, I'm going to do that. That's going to be the first question I ask. Someone's going to say bike.
Get it right. Yeah, okay. So obviously you both work at the Register. You're surrounded by the RAGBRAI team. You kind of live and breathe RAGBRAI whether you like it or not. So it's probably safe to say before the documentary process, before Shift, you knew a lot about RAGBRAI. So in making this thing, in collecting footage, in talking to people, did you learn some things that surprised you a little bit?
I think for myself, I've covered RAGBRAI for the 10 years that I've worked at the Register. And I always love it. But I think the thing about this year that felt different was that, and when we talk about the documentary, we talk about this, but when John and Don started this whole thing, it was all about being on the ride and telling stories about people on the ride. And this was the first year that I got to be there for the full 7 days and just be on the ride and tell stories. And this was the first time that I sort of felt the closest to that original mission of RAGBRAI.
Yeah, I mean, this was started by 2 newspaper columnists who, the joke is that they just wanted the Register to pay for their vacation across Iowa. But the reality is, that they were 2 writers who understood that Iowa's story is best told on her gravel roads, on her main streets, looking people in the eye, over a beer, over a coffee. And they did that. They just did it on the back of bicycles. And so to really immerse yourself in that as a journalist is powerful. It just reminds you to get out and to tell stories when you can see a person, when you can feel them, when you can bounce ideas off of them. A lot of times in media, I mean, we're calling people, it's just a different landscape from there. But the way they did it, it leads to deeper connections, which ultimately leads to better stories.
Yeah, I mean, so like Toyota did this when they wanted to enter the United States market with just Toyota. They wanted to get their Lexus brand into the market, and they sent a bunch of their executives to the United States just to live here, live the luxury lifestyle for a long time so they could really get in the heads of those they wanted to serve, right? Harley-Davidson did the same thing. Their executives went out and hit random biker bars across the country, and they were told, don't talk about Harley. Someone asks you where you work, you can bring it up, that's fine, but just collect information and get into the communities we want to serve, and that's what you're doing. And so that's what RAGBRAI is all about. I really like how you said that, Kelsey. Like the original mission of RAGBRAI. I think that's how you phrased it. I think I wrote it down right.
Yes, yeah.
Our newspapers across the country, I know newspapers are struggling, right? And we're going to touch on this briefly because we have a lot more to go into. But is that like part of why they're struggling? Because we're getting away from that? We're like looking at Twitter, we're looking at the internet, we're not getting in the communities. And is this kind of a reminder of that? Or is there something else going on?
I don't know. That's an interesting way to think about it, and I've not thought about it that way before. I think, Courtney sort of mentioned this. The way that we tell stories now has changed, right? I mean, the documentary and getting to tell the story this way was really unique and really special. Rarely do we have the time and the resources to sort of put this amount of effort into the story. And I think, that we see that in all kinds of business, right? People just don't have the time and the resources to sort of invest in these sort of higher quality, sort of things. And, we still have a daily newspaper. We still have the internet that we need to put content on all of the time, right? The deadline is now. And so,
that's true.
So it's very rare to get to spend this much time on a story. And I think that's also part of why it's such a good story.
Sit in it, to sit with people in it. That's just not something that the current media landscape allows for a lot. But there were 2 things going on. We got to sit with people as they experienced whatever they were experiencing for the whole time. And then we were there, right? The ultimate mission of RAGBRAI, we were there when it was happening. And that leads to the narrative arc that I think is really powerful and emotional in this work.
Yeah, and that's hard stuff, right? Like when I was reading, you guys sent me some stuff ahead of time, some links that you had written. And my first thought when I was reading that is, wait a minute. 2 guys just decided, let's go on a bike ride and let's make our work pay for it. We're going to hang out. We're going to do this thing. And the Register's response was, okay, take readers with you. I'm like, with what you're describing, right? It used to be 24-hour news cycle, right? Which sounds great, doesn't it? 24-hour, like you can wait 24 hours to get something out there. That sounds amazing. It's not that way anymore. Now it's like a 20-minute news cycle and you're behind.
Sure.
20 minutes.
Right. Feels like it.
Yeah, so I was like thinking, my word, how times have changed. They used to have this was an idea that someone approved. Like, sure, spend a week. Does it take about a week to get across the...
7 days?
7, yeah. So sure, take a week, take readers with you. I'm like, woof, times have, there is no way that would fly today. Or maybe there's a era on the horizon where that comes back. I don't know what you think about that, but then we'll move on to other topics.
I mean, I think that this documentary is an example of how you can do it, right? Our newsroom, this is not breaking news. We're smaller than we've ever been.
Right, yeah.
That's the reality of newspaper journalism. And yet, our bosses, Carol Hunter specifically, believe so deeply in this project, she was willing to invest money, time, and resources in it. And not just ours, right? We had 10.
We had a crew of 10 people on the ride.
And then, countless hours from us. It's, if you want to punch above your weight, you can. You just have to have the passion for it. So are we in a time where everything is going to be a yes? No. That's newspapers today. But I think we're in a time where if it's special and you have two people or more or one who believe in it enough, it'll carry itself to the end.
Yeah. So speaking about people, like who are these people that you followed? Obviously, we'll talk about when it releases and that kind of thing, how you get tickets, all that soon. But who were these people you followed? Because what's interesting and what most people forget is RAGBRAI is not just an Iowa thing. The entire country comes. I don't know if you just followed Iowans, if you sampled other people, but who were these people? What are their stories?
So there are 5 people and 4 storylines that we follow throughout the documentary. And from my perspective, sort of in the storytelling arc, I talked to a lot more than that. I mean, probably phone interviews with dozens of people.
Sure, yeah.
And then slightly fewer people to a Zoom interview because people have to be good on camera. That's also a part of this.
Yeah,
and then slightly fewer to the ride. We did follow more people on the ride than actually ended up in the documentary. But it's 5 people, 4 storylines. Dana Chandler, who is a Des Moines native, who started biking because of her personal tragedy, but used biking as a way to encourage more Black women, she is Black, to get on bikes. So you'll hear about her personal tragedy and also how she's changed that goal to give hope and joy to others. Adam Lineberry, who is from Mobile, Alabama, who is riding through the continental United States over 4 years to raise money for an addiction rehab center.
Wow, okay.
He himself has fallen into addiction 3 different times. He's a father. And so when he looked at how he could stabilize himself, biking became what it was. He also brings his son along, his 10-year-old son. So there's some really beautiful, like Norman Rockwell father-son moments. Then we have Tori Giffen. She's from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And she had a viral moment in RAGBRAI 2021 when a fellow RAGBRAIer said a rude comment to her son who was on an e-bike because of cancer. And she posted it on Facebook. It went viral and kind of Iowans responded with a fierce kindness. And so you're going to hear about what happened there, what the e-bike thing was about, and then where they're at. She's on the ride, maybe with Daniel, maybe without. And then 4th, we have our town view. Because the other big part about RAGBRAI, it's not just the riders, it's these towns that volunteer, everything to make sure these people from across the world have the best time. So we follow Andrew and Ian, who are a couple and are literally the music teachers of Allamakee County. One is the elementary school teacher and one is the high school, middle school teacher of music.
Oh, that's funny.
In that county. And they led the Lansing committee. So they talk a lot about the importance of rural America and how rural America can survive in today's times. So it's really, there are so many ways in. These people are normal people just like you and me. They are not cyclists. They are not Lance Armstrong. They are not wearing the kits. They're not flying at 80 miles an hour. They are doing this for something in their lives, to celebrate, to move forward, to change their life.
That was my big question is why? Because I like biking. I guess I can't say I like biking as much as the other next person, but I like biking. But the idea of riding from river to river across the state has not once appealed to me. And people, because it's a thing, right? You either love it or you don't. And some people are like, yeah, but you're all like sweaty and you're camping together. And I'm like, wow, you're just making it like fall a little lower on my list as you talk. But some people, it's almost like a cult. Can I say that? Whatever, who cares?
It's your podcast.
Yeah, it's my podcast. If you want to complain, Justin at iowapodcast.com, and I'll put your complaint right in the shredder. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating story. But is there a core reason why people do it? Is it just kind of I need to win something, I need to prove something to myself? Is that kind of the core reason, or are there various reasons? Because a lot of these stories you're telling me are something happened, I need to get on top of the world, and I'm going to do RAGBRAI. But does everyone share that, or are there different stories?
I mean, there are, of course, different reasons why people ride RAGBRAI. And much like the state fair, it becomes a tradition for people over time. So there may be someone who started for some personal reason and now just come back because of the community that's built, because of the party that is out there. So there's not one reason why people RAGBRAI, but I think like the point you're kind of getting at is that in order to put your life on hold, so it takes,
That's a good point. Yeah.
5 days off of work, right? Put your life on hold, go to these tiny towns, and when I say middle of nowhere, I'm not being offensive, like it's just true. These tiny towns, be hot, sweaty, wait in line for a bathroom, wait in line for a porta potty, eat pork chops for 6 days in a row. Like to do all of this.
Okay, that part sounds good though. I'm okay with that part.
To do all of this, there is a greater reason. I think if you asked people, right? If you asked people the second question, no, really, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
It's to overcome something, to celebrate something, to grow in some way. And I don't think it's to win because very specifically, this is a race, not a ride, or a ride, not a race. It's a ride, not a race. So like,
can you win it though? Like, if there is a theoretical first person, does anything happen?
I've watched the first person bike in, and it's not.
They put.
There's like nobody there yet. It's like nobody's
announcing. Like you're not crossing through anything.
They get across. They're like pumping their fists, and it's crickets in the background.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
The music might not even be playing yet. It's.
That's
so
super
it's
funny.
all about just whatever is driving you to be there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think it's that second question, right? First question, why are you RAGBRAIing? Pie, friends, buses, whatever it is. But I think the second question, you'll find that it's often something deeper.
Are there any like really good community stories? Because that's the other part of this, right? The riders going across the state, dipping their tires in the river. By the way, real quick side note, if you don't dip your tires in the river, did you not do RAGBRAI?
It still counts.
Still counts?
Still
okay.
counts.
See, there's the actual endorsement right there. Okay.
It's official.
Are there any cool stories about the communities? Because the communities take a very important part of this. And I'll give you my own personal example, but this is about you guys, so I'll keep it short. I was at Central Campus during Business Horizons in Pella. And I think it's called Row. I think the building's Row. I think it's right. It was right on the RAGBRAI Trail. And so I got there pretty early. And of course, there's this huge stream of riders. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot of people. Like going by, I think I watched it for 10 minutes. I was like, this is incredible. I just never understood how big it was. And then I went and did Business Horizon stuff and came back like 4 hours later, still the same stream of riders. It was nonstop all day. It is truly hard to wrap your mind around it. How many total riders are there, by the way? I don't think I asked that yet.
Isn't it like 20,000-ish?
Yeah, wow. That is crazy.
20,000. And this is, on rural routes. But yeah, there's a million community stories. We focus a lot on the overnight towns, which is where people are staying overnight. So that's where the big concert is, where most of the food is, that kind of thing. But there's a stop, every 10 miles or so. And these are towns of hundreds of people. Like Lansing, which was an overnight town, the final town, has less than 800 people in it. And they've swelled to support 20,000 people.
How does that even happen?
They have to spend time thinking about
Logistics
what roads people will drive on, right? Because there's only 4 streets in and out of town. And so they have to decide, okay, well, these 2 will be bikes and these 2 will be cars. And then there's nothing else, right? Some of these towns, that's the kind of logistics they have to go through. But
they're bringing in porta potties, they're bringing in facilities.
And the community support is so essential. You can't. You cannot bike across the state of Iowa without somebody making sure you have water and somebody making sure you have food and somebody, and like playing music and also making it fun, right? I think the people of Iowa who show up to support the riders are so important and so essential to RAGBRAI.
Now, do communities like campaign for the route to come by? Do they come through the Des Moines Register offices and say, hey, it sure would be nice. We got this Main Street repaved the other day. It'd be really nice to have you guys come by.
So insiders, there is now, from those 2 newspaper reporters who had an idea in 1973, it has grown to a team of people who, truly us reporters and editors and photographers in the Register have no control, so don't email us. We have no control. There's a whole team that is essentially event planners for RAGBRAI now. I think they're 6 people
Yeah, they have
strong.
their own little space in your headquarters.
Well, they have their own building now. They have their own office.
What? Yeah. Wait, when did this happen?
Recently.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because I went by the RAGBRAI room in the Register years ago. There were like chains on these steel doors. They weren't allowed to leave. That was the RAGBRAI room.
That was the whole thing. Yeah. No, now now they're right over where Madhouse Brewing used to be, like way back in the day.
So were they just creating too much of a commotion? You had to kick them out?
They're just growing.
Oh,
I mean,
wow,
they're
really?
growing in merch sales. They're growing in what the ride looks like. But to quickly answer your point, yes, cities campaign all year long for this opportunity.
Really? Wow.
And you know, Matt Phippen, ride director, or Ann Lowry, cycling director, would know more about the specifics of that. But yeah, people campaign. I mean, this is a big deal. The economic impact that this brings to even small, what we call pass-through towns.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Is millions.
Sure.
I mean, it really is. So
you got to order a lot of tenderloins.
Yeah,
I mean, if the towns do it right, and I don't want to give away the documentary, but if the towns do it right, I mean,
you can
there's
go
a
ahead.
Huge,
No one listens to this show anyway.
There's such a big benefit for the towns, you know?
No kidding. No kidding. So part of the story of, and I don't know if you cover this at all, you can say, we don't want to talk about that.
Sure.
Is there anything in there about the Iowa ride controversy and that whole thing? Because that was awesome drama. I don't know if you guys like that kind of drama, because journalists like drama. They like those cool stories, but that one was a little close to home. So is there anything in there about that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. Because
What happened? Like, what was that thing? This is not a leading question. I legit have no idea what that was about.
What I want to say about the documentary part of it is we made this documentary to last the test of time. You know, I think in 20 years, if people watch this, it will still have the same meaning and impact. And so for us, as we looked for a really broad story, we're celebrating 50. We're releasing it because people are excited about 50. But the emotions, the themes, the visuals are true forever. So getting into any one specific thing was not really where we wanted to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say we do an interview in the State Historical Museum, and the portion of the display we chose, there is a photo of TJ in the documentary.
And this is the person that was like left the register, wanted to do the Iowa ride. Yeah. And I don't think it ever happened, did it?
It did not.
It was going to happen. Nothing happened. But yeah, that was an interesting story. I just figured you wanted to,
But it's out of focus and it's in the background. It's a real deep cut. But if you know, then you might recognize it.
That can be on like the next version of this podcast. We can talk about controversies at the register. That time Courtney came in and lit a trash can on fire, and
remember that I didn't get A1. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'll do.
So are there any interesting stories that came out of towns? Like I feel like there are a ton of crazy stories when tens of thousands of people descend on a town of 800 people. I imagine you are full to the brim of absolutely nutty stories.
I mean, RAGBRAI is full of stories.
I can't imagine.
If you are someone who wants to tell stories in any way, RAGBRAI is the place for you to go, because you can meet any type of person, any type of town, any type of story. There are always stories out of towns. And I think one of the most beautiful parts, and it's not really a focus, right? Our focus is those 4 storylines. But one of the most beautiful parts of the documentary is how many Iowans just show up, pull out their camp chair, and watch people go by. Oh my God. And they're encouraging along the way.
The cheering people on.
I mean, they bring little coolers, like they are there for the day to see the parade, but they're not just silent. They are literally screaming, "You've got this, you can do this, keep going." I mean, preschools will bring all their kids out, so they wave and shake
cheer,
things.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, as an Iowan, it's a really beautiful thing to see how much, not only do these towns who plan for a year and really, make sure you have food and water and all of that, but just even the community comes out to clap and engage and, say thank you for being here.
Well, and in the documentary, we focus our time on Lansing, and I think there are both very lighthearted moments and then some other really good moments where we sort of show what it's like to be one of those towns. The things that Andrew and Ian sort of have to deal with and address just because they're the people who are leading RAGBRAI coming to their town. It's things like roadkill. It's things like, it's things like needing to go drive a bus because they're out of bus drivers, and so we get into some of that as well in the documentary.
How about pothole evasion? Are there courses on pothole evasion?
So,
training at your office, like a simulator?
Right. There are a few rules. I mean, nothing to do with the documentary, just covering RAGBRAI. There are a few rules. So one...
Wait, there are rules?
No cars on the route.
Oh, you cannot drive on the route.
Okay, you say of course. Like,
anytime the general public gets involved. Yeah.
And the other thing is the direct route, like the Google Maps route, most likely from town to town, is the bike route. So this is a lot of like, as you're covering
you're picking
RAGBRAI,
efficient routes. Basically.
You're picking. When I do it, I got my map out. Like you're trying to go around because the route is mostly the most direct way to get anywhere.
So we're on the gravel roads, the level B.
Wait, people are biking on gravel roads?
No, we are the people covering it.
The reporters and photographers to get to the route because we can't drive on the route.
I was like, that really sounds painful.
Yeah, there is a gravel loop for bikers who are interested in gravel.
Mountain bikers might want that.
Oh,
sure.
People love it. Yeah. I mean, like, again, nothing to do with the documentary, but there is an interesting thing in biking right now where because people are scared of being on the roads, gravel biking has really exploded.
People bring more than one bike to RAGBRAI, so they have their bike for the gravel loop day. Yeah.
So they have a team. Some of these people, because I know some people bring buses and they have teams and that kind of thing. And it is interesting. And we had Dan Koenig of Ichi Bike in here a couple weeks ago, and he was like, we talked about like one of the reasons RAGBRAI is so appealing because some Iowans will complain about like how flat it is. Oh, it's just so flat here. Like usually younger people that want to leave the state. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like, well, actually not true because you go to northwestern or northeastern Iowa, actually, come to think of it, we have a pretty good range of topography. But what's great is it's not Colorado. It's not insane here. So you don't have to be, like you said earlier, Lance Armstrong to do it. Like on the clips you showed, it is a very diverse representation of Iowans. Like it's not in that thing, all these super powered, like you said, clocking 30 miles an hour, all decked out in gear. That's not what you see. So it really is. It was interesting to me to watch just that little clip. So let's talk about that with our last we're a little over, that's okay. Last few seconds. It's called Shift. When does it come out? Where is it? How do we get tickets? Is there a website?
So it premieres on May 4th at the Varsity Theater. That show is sold out, though, so if you don't already have tickets, but you can buy tickets to see it at the Varsity the rest of the weekend, and then they'll continue to show the documentary as long as there's interest. So it'll be at the Varsity for a little while. The Varsity will also bring it back while RAGBRAI is in Des Moines. It will be on Iowa PBS in July. And then we do have a website. It's DesMoinesRegister.com/RAGBRAI documentary. And on the website is the trailer and, all information about our characters and, everything. If you have questions, there's probably an answer there.
So premiere's sold out, but tickets aren't sold out because it's going to be open for, how long is it going? Like a week, you said? Or?
So it's going to go until there's interest. So, I mean, don't sleep on it, but if you've got plans, Friday and Saturday, Sunday is an option, right?
Yeah.
But the premiere on the 4th is sold out.
Got it. Courtney Crowder, columnist at the Des Moines Register, and Kelsey Kremer, photo editor at the Des Moines Register. Both of you, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.